Hello. Welcome to Storytime with Moog. I am Moog, and today we are continuing on with The Deerslayer by James Fenimore Cooper, starting with chapter 19. But first, hello everybody. So good to see you. I need to remember to not move my head so much because these are not in very stable. Hello everybody. So good to see you. I did. Do you like it? Something's a little different. Something's a little different. Star, hello. Enjoy your lurk, please. Take care. Please, please, please. Pulse, hello. Mermaid of 5 stream streak. Thanks so much. It's good to see you. Hello. Hello. Hi. Something is different. Something's different. Also, is this not straight? Oh my god. Is it not even? It's fine. Just a little crooked. It's fine. It didn't look crooked before, but it's fine. It's okay. Nobody's looking. It's fine. Hello everybody. How are we doing? Happy Tuesday. Happy Tuesday. Anything fun? Anything exciting? I mean, it's a Tuesday. Are we really doing fun and exciting things on Tuesday? Probably not. It's a good thing that it's rabbit season. Right, exactly. Um, yeah, it was just a regular Tuesday. I don't know. It's fine. It's a good thing I have no worries about being slain while we read this book. It's okay. The little cow. Oh my god, that emote. That emote is so cute. So, this is a full-on coat. It is warm. I shall be turning my fan on. Groker, hello. Good to see you. I'm gonna turn it on right now and you can't stop me. This is a full-on coat. And it's really warm today. I'm looking it up, don't worry. Let's see, weather. Well, right now it's 72 Fahrenheit. Or if it were Celsius, it's 22. 65% humidity. It's not that bad, I guess. It's just warm in here. It's just warm in here. My dear. How many deer puns are we gonna do today? That's the real question. You got the yesterday's storm was so bad. Okay, so we were streaming, we were doing sprints, and then like as towards the end of sprints, I could hear the rain outside. Like not terrible, but like I knew that it was raining. And then when I like shut everything down, I like looked outside and visibility was like 0. Visibility was like 0. It was raining sideways. All of our all of our plants were just disintegrated. I have a picture of one of the flower beds on Discord, in the IRL stream if you want to see what the flower bed ended up looking like. There were 5 pretty thriving plants in there. No more. And we lost power. We lost power for like 4 or 5 hours, but not like our whole unit, only like half of it. So like the office lost power and most of the kitchen lost power and some of like the living space. It was weird. It was, I don't know why. We had one outlet in the kitchen that worked. It's fine. It's fine. Furry stream. Fell off the wrong end of the bed this morning. Yep. Yep, yep. Yes. Buddy, hello, good to see you. So glad that you mowed. It'd be terrible. It'd be terrible. You haven't heard first one of the day. First pun of the day. And unfortunately. There we go. I was like, it's in there. Lucas, hello, good to you. Stagnated. I'll fawn over this fawn. Yeah. Keep them coming. Keep them coming. You know I live for these. Terrible. Terrible. So yeah. Your old house was wired. Oh yeah. Where you'd lose power in one outlet in the bedroom, the lights, but not the fan in the bathroom, the living room, but not the dining room, and just the fridge from the kitchen. I don't understand how this place is wired. I don't understand. And like we tried like the tripwires to see like if it would like reset or something. No. So I don't understand how anything in this house is wired. I don't know. Oh dear. Oh dear. Missing out on puns? Don't. Terrible. Terrible. It's a Midwest masterpiece. And like it was a small pocket of people that lost power. Because I was talking to somebody who only lives like a couple blocks away and didn't have any issues with power. So I don't know. I was just lucky that way, I guess. Just real lucky. Hooray. Bucked up. Mm-hmm. Terrible. Terrible. Do deer make sound? I'm gonna look it up. Deer noises. Let's see. Oh, okay. YouTube. I don't know if I should trust a YouTube channel that's called Rib Ticklers, though. National Deer Association. Maybe that one would be more reputable. Oh no, just make a noise, please. Don't talk to me. Oh, okay. Well, that's a human making the noise. Hold on, hold on. Fine, we'll listen to Rib Ticklers. Hold on. Okay. All right. Hold on.
Calling for mom.
That's a, oh.
It's called bleeding. Bless me. She's hungry. Calling for friends. Very inquisitive. Mom calling fawns.
Okay,
Waiting for them to come.
Oh. All right, now we know. Now we know what they sound like. They just kind of whine, it seems like. They're just whiny little guys. You don't have the Hear No Evil one? Is it? Oh, I think that one's it's bit based. It's fine. It's fine. There it is. You can only see no evil and speak no evil. Thank you for the bit. That didn't help? All right. Oof. I pulled a muscle in my back. I know all of you care, and none of you, I know you don't care. I'm gonna tell you anyway. I pulled a muscle in my back. I think it was when I was doing yoga over the weekend because we were doing a lot of like twisting motions. And I think I just was really gung-ho about it. And it didn't bother me then. Yesterday, I was having a good old-fashioned sit on the couch. And then when I got up is when it started hurting. And it hurts like just on like right here, like the back, like the back rib on the left side. So like when you take a really, really deep breath, it hurts. When you reach forward, it hurts. Delayed onset muscle soreness. That's what I got. That's what I got. That's what's going on. That's what you get for jumping all those fences. Oh, that is what I get. That is what I get. You're right. I did. The ribs are sore from all the tickling. Yes, making all those noise for the YouTube channel Rib Tickler. As someone with back problems, you can relate. I hate that. I hate it for you. But I slept with a heating pad last night, and it's like it turns off every 2 hours just as like a safety precaution thing. And I woke up, I'm pretty sure every 2 hours when the heating pad went off, and I like moved, and I was like, and then I would like turn it back on. I would turn it back on. Lucas, thank you for screaming like a fawn. Thank you. Thank you. Red Autumn, hello. So good to see you. All right. Let's do it. Our first chapter is almost an hour long. It's a chonky one. I'm going to see what our next chapter is. We're starting with chapter 19 today. Let's see. Let's see. Okay. Is anybody surprised that they're both heckin' chonkers? Or just me? Or just me? The lidocaine patches are good for that spot, but they're really good for when your lower back gets angry. Oh, okay. I haven't even heard of that. Okay, good. Good to know. You have to go back and forth with heat and ice. Icy hot. That's what, well, okay. I haven't used icy hot in a millennia. So, is it still gross? Like, it's a cream, but does the cream still get kind of nasty? Because that's why I don't use it. It's a roll-on. Okay, well, that's fancy. That is fancy. I would use a roll-on before using that nasty cream in a tube. Okay. I'm gonna have to look into the roll-on because there's been several times where I, like, was a little too aggressive and have hurt myself. Icy hot roll-on. Okay. Oh, yep, there it is. I haven't seen this. Okay, great. Clearly, I don't look around very much when I go to the store. Okay. The original, you can get original and the lidocaine roll-on. And they have a nighttime recovery one. Huh. Okay. All right. I'm gonna leave that tab up so I don't forget. All right. Let's get to it today. Let's get to it. Today we are continuing on with The Deerslayer by James Fenimore Cooper. We're starting with chapter 19. What's happened so far? So glad that you asked. Well, two major things have happened. One, now Deerslayer is captured. It's his turn to be captured. Now he's captured. They have rescued Watawa, and Judith and Hetty are in a boat on their way back because Hetty was sent to go see how Deerslayer was doing with the tribe. Hetty's on the way back in the boat with Judith. They cannot find the ark. Ruh-roh. And then they hear a big old gunfire. Ruh-roh. And they see somebody, we don't know who, dead against a tree. Ruh-roh. Those are the big ones. Those are the big ones. Don't attempt to do it blind. Well, yeah, you're right. You're right. And honestly, I probably would have, and it would have hurt me even more. Thank you. And ibuprofen. And I always forget about ibuprofen. Thank you. Yes. I shall. I shall ibuprofen and roll on icy hot. Can't wait to hear more of the story, Bambi. Did we watch Bambi when we were younger? I watched it so much as a child to the point where my parents didn't want to watch it with me anymore. And like thinking back, it wasn't even like my favorite one. I loved 101 Dalmatians. That was my jam. 101 Dalmatians. Jungle Book. Loved Jungle Book. But I don't know why. I don't know why. I have to redo them. They're like chipping, like this one. I'll redo it tomorrow. You saw it in theaters at probably 3 p.m. or you were 3. Okay, let's have a sip. Let's be good to ourselves. I thought about being weird like a deer and just being like, it's like, that's terrible. Don't do that. You were 3. That makes sense. And it was probably 3 p.m. right after nap time. Great. Not for free. Loves a matinee. I mean, matinees are the time to go. They're cheaper. It's great. All right, let's do it. Chapter 19. Stand to your arms and guard the door. All's lost, unless that fearful bell be silenced soon. The officer hath missed his path or purpose, or met some unforeseen and hideous obstacle. Anselmo, with thy company proceed, straight to the tower, the rest remain with me. My lip stuff is not real lip stuff, and when I had water, it started to bleed into my mouth. I'll be right back, because this tastes disgusting. Hold on. It's not real lip stuff. It's like face paint. Okay, this was a terrible decision. Okay, I'll be right back. This is actually for lips. I just use the same stuff that I used for like my nose, which is like face paint. And I was like, oh, it'll be fine. It'll match and it'll be great. And then as soon as I took water, like it's like a cream based. So as soon as I took water, it just started just like seeping into my mouth. And it was very disgusting. So I had to wipe that off. Thank you for your patience. Disgusting. Dear Abby. Terrible. Terrible. Dealing with deer stuff right now, okay? All right? God. Thank you. The deer army. Thank you. All right. We finished the quote. Byron Marino Faliero. 4. Lines 230 to 35. The conjecture of Judith Hutter concerning the manner in which the girl had met her death was accurate in the main. After sleeping several hours, her father and March awoke. This occurred a few minutes after she had left the ark to go in quest of her sister. And when, of course, Chingachgook and his betrothed were on board, from the Delaware, the old man learned the position of the camp and the recent events, as well as the absence of his daughters. The latter gave him no concern, for he relied greatly on the sagacity of the elder and the known impunity with which the younger passed among the enemies. Long familiarity with danger, too, had blunted his sensibilities. Nor did he see much to regret the captivity of Deerslayer, for, while he knew how material his aid might be in a defense, the difference in their views on the morality of the woods had not left much sympathy between them. He would have rejoiced to know the position of the camp before it had been alarmed by the escape of Hist, but it would be too hazardous now to venture to land, and he reluctantly relinquished for the night the ruthless designs that cupidity and revenge had excited him to entertain. In this mood, Hutter took a seat in the head of the scow, where he was quickly joined by Hurry, leaving the serpent and hissed in quiet possession of the other extremity of the vessel. Deerslayer has shown himself a boy in going among the enemies at this hour and letting himself fall into their hands like a deer that tumbles into a pit. Growled the old man, perceiving as usual the mote in his neighbor's eyes, while he overlooked the beam in his own. If he is left to pay for his stupidity with his own flesh, he can blame no one but himself. That's the way of the world, old Tom, returned Hurry. Every man must meet his own debts and answer for his own sins. I'm amazed, hows'ever, that a lad as skilful and watchful as Deerslayer should have been caught in such a trap. Didn't he know any better than to go prowling about a Huron camp at midnight with no place to retreat to but a lake? Or did he think himself a buck, that by taking to the water could throw off the scent and swim himself out of difficulty? I had a better opinion of the boy's judgment, I'll own, but we must overlook a little ignorance in a raw hand. I say, Master Hutter, do you happen to know what has become of the gals? I see no signs of Judith or Hetty, though I've been through the Ark and looked into all its living creatures. Hutter briefly explained the manner in which his daughters had taken to the canoe, as it had been related to the Delaware, as well as the return of Judith, after landing her sister, and her second departure. This comes of a smooth tongue, Floating Tom, exclaimed Hurry, grating his teeth in pure resentment. This comes of a smooth tongue and silly gal's inclinations, and you had best look into the matter. You and I were both prisoners. Hurry could recall that circumstance now. You and I were both prisoners, and yet Judith never stirred an inch to do us any service. She is bewitched with this lank-looking Deerslayer, and he, and she, and you, and all of us had best look to it. I am not a man to put up with such a wrong quietly, and I say, all the parties had best look to it. Let's up kedge, old fellow, and move nearer to this point, and see how matters are getting on. Hutter had no objections to this movement, and the Ark was got under way in the usual manner, care being taken to make no noise. The wind was passing northward, and the sail soon swept the scow so far up the lake as to render the dark outlines of the trees that clothed the point dimly visible. Floating Tom steered, and he sailed along as near the land as the depth of the water and the overhanging branches would allow. It was impossible to distinguish anything that stood within the shadows of the shore, but the forms of the sail and of the hut were discerned by the young sentinel on the beach, who has already been mentioned. In the moment of sudden surprise, a deep native exclamation escaped him. In that spirit of recklessness and ferocity that formed the essence of Hurry's character, this man dropped his rifle and fired. The ball was sped by accident, or by that overhauling providence which decides the fates of all, and the girl fell. Then followed the scene with the torches, which has just been described. At the precise moment when Hurry committed this act of unthinking cruelty, the canoe of Judith was within 100 feet of the spot from which the Ark had so lately moved. Her own course has been described, and it has now become our office to follow that of her father and his companions. The shriek announced the effects of the random shot of March, and it also proclaimed that the victim was a woman. Hurry himself was startled at these unlooked-for consequences, and for a moment he was sorely disturbed by conflicting sensations. At first, he laughed, in reckless and rude-mind exultation, and then conscious, that monitor planted in our chest by God, and which receives its more general growth from the training bestowed in the tillage of childhood, shot a pang to his heart. For a minute, The mind of this creature, equally of civilization and of barbarism, was a sort of chaos as to feeling, not knowing what to think of its own act, and then the obstinacy and pride of one of his habits interposed to assert their usual ascendancy. He struck the butt of his rifle on the bottom of the scow with a species of defiance, and began to whistle a low air with an affectation of indifference. All this time, the ark was in motion, and it was already opening the bay above the point and was consequently quitting the land. Hurry's companions did not view his conduct with the same indulgence as that with which he appeared disposed to regard it himself. Hutter growled out his dissatisfaction, for the act led to no advantage, while it threatened to render the warfare more vindictive than ever, and none censure motiveless departures from the right more severely than the mercenary and unprincipled. Still, he commanded himself, the capacity of Deerslayer rendering the arm of the offender of double consequence to him at that moment. Chingachgook arose, and for a single instant the ancient animosity of tribes was forgotten, in a feeling of color. But he recollected himself in season to prevent any of the fierce consequences that, for a passing moment, he certainly meditated. Not so with Hist. Rushing through the hut, or cabin, the girl stood at the side of Hurry almost as soon as his rifle touched the bottom of the scow, and with a fearlessness that did credit to her heart, she poured out her reproaches with the generous warmth of a woman. "What for you shoot?" she said. "What Huron gal do, that you kill him? What you think Manitou say? What you think Manitou feel? What Iroquois do? No get honor, no get camp, no get prisoner, no get battle, no get scalp, no get noting at all. Blood come after blood. How you feel your wife killed? Who pity you when tear come for mother or sister? You big as great pine, Huron gal little slender birch. Why you fall on her and crush her? You think Huron forget it? No. Native never forget. Never forget, friend, never forget, enemy. Indigenous Manitou in dat. Why you so wicked, great settler?" Hurry had never been so daunted as by this close and warm attack of the indigenous girl. It is true that she had a powerful ally in his conscience, and while she spoke earnestly, it was in tones so feminine as to deprive him of any pretext for unmanly anger. The softness of her voice added to the weight of her remonstrance, by leading to the latter an air of purity and truth. Like most vulgar-minded men, he had only regarded the natives through the medium of their coarser and fiercer characteristics. It had never struck him that the affections are human, and that even high principles, modified by habits and prejudices, but not the less elevated within their circle, can exist in the enemy state, and that the warrior who is most ruthless in the field can submit to the softest and gentlest influences in the moments of domestic quiet. In a word, it was the habit of his mind to regard all natives as being only a slight degree removed from the wild beasts that roamed the woods, and to feel disposed to treat them accordingly, whenever interest or caprice supplied a motive or an impulse. Still, though daunted by these reproaches, the handsome barbarian could hardly be said to be penitent. He was too much rebuked by conscience to suffer an outbreak of temper to escape him, and perhaps he felt that he had already committed an act that might justly bring his manhood in question. Instead of resenting, or answering the simple but natural appeal of Hist, he walked away, like one who disdained entering into controversy with a woman. In the meanwhile, the ark swept onward, and by the time the scene with the torches was enacted beneath the trees, it had reached the open lake, floating Tom causing it to sheer further from the land with a sort of instinctive dread of retaliation. An hour now passed in gloomy silence, no one appearing disposed to break it. Hist had retired to her pallet, and Chingachgook lay sleeping in the forward part of the scow. Hutter and Hurry alone remained awake, the former at the steering oar, while the latter brooded over his own conduct, with the stubbornness of one little given to a confession of his errors, and the secret goadings of the worm that never dies. This was at the moment when Judith and Hetty reached the center of the lake and had lain down to endeavor to sleep in their drifting canoe. The night was calm, though so much obscured by clouds. The season was not one of storms, and those which did occur in the month of June on that embedded water, though frequently violent, were always of short continuance. Nevertheless, there was the usual current of heavy, damp night air, which, passing over the summits of the trees, scarcely appeared to descend as low as the surface of the glassy lake, but kept moving a short distance above it, saturated with the humidity that constantly arose from the woods, and apparently never proceeding far in any one direction. The currents were influenced by the formation of the hills as a matter of course, a circumstance that rendered even fresh breezes baffling, and which reduced the feebler efforts of the night air to be a sort of capricious and fickle sighings of the woods. Several times the head of the ark pointed east, and once it was actually turned towards the south again. But, on the whole, it worked its way north, Hutter making always a fair wind, if wind it could be called, his principal motive appearing to keep in motion in order to defeat any treacherous design of his enemies. He now felt some little concern about his daughters, and perhaps as much about the canoe, but, on the whole, this uncertainty did not much disturb him, as he had the reliance already mentioned on the intelligence of Judith. It was the season of the shortest nights, and it was not long before the deep obscurity which precedes the day begins to yield to the returning light. If any earthly scene could be presented to the senses of man that might soothe his passions and temper his ferocity, it was that which grew upon the eyes of Hutter and Hurry as the hours advanced, changing night to morning. There were the usual soft tints of the sky, in which neither the gloom of darkness nor the brilliancy of the sun prevails, and under which objects appear more unearthly, and we might add holy, than to any other portion of the 24 hours. The beautiful and soothing calm of eventide has been extolled by 1,000 poets, and yet it does not bring with it the far-reaching and sublime thoughts of the half-hour that precedes the rising of a summer sun. In the one case, the panorama is gradually hid from the sight, while in the other, its objects start out from the unfolding picture, first dim and misty, then marked in solemn background, next seen in the witchery of an increasing, a thing as different as possible from the decreasing twilight, and finally mellow, distant, and luminous. As the rays of the great center of light diffuse themselves in the atmosphere, hymns of birds, too, have no moral counterpart in the retreat to the roost, or the flight to the nest, and these invariably accompany the advent of the day, until the appearance of the sun itself bathes in deep joy the land and sea. All this, however, Hutter and Hurry witnessed without experiencing any of that calm delight which the spectacle is wont to bring, when the thoughts are just and the aspirations pure. They not only witnessed it, but they witnessed it under circumstances that had a tendency to increase its power and to heighten its charms. Only one solitary object became visible in the returning light that had received its form or uses from human taste or human desires, which as often deform as beautify a landscape. This was the castle, all the rest being native, and fresh from the hand of God. That singular residence, too, was in keeping with the natural objects of the view, starting out from the gloom, quaint, picturesque, and ornamental. Nevertheless, the whole was lost on the observers, who knew no feeling of poverty, who knew no feeling of poetry, had lost their sense of natural devotion in lives of obdurate and narrow selfishness, and had little other sympathy with nature than that which originated with her lowest wants. As soon as the light was sufficiently strong to allow of a distinct view of the lake, and more particularly of its shores, Hutter turned the head of the ark directly towards the castle, with the avowed intention of taking possession, for the day at least, as the place most favorable for meeting his daughters and for carrying on his operations against the natives. By this time, Chingachgook was up, and Hist was heard stirring among the furniture of the kitchen. The place for which they steered was distant only a mile, and the air was sufficiently favorable to permit it to be reached by means of the sail. At this moment, too, to render the appearances generally auspicious, the canoe of Judith was seen floating northward in the broadest part of the lake, having actually passed the scow in the darkness, in obedience to no other power than that of the elements. Hutter got his glass, and took a long and anxious survey to ascertain if his daughters were in the light craft or not, and a slight exclamation like that of joy escaped him, as he caught a glimpse of what he rightly conceived to be a part of Judith's dress above the top of the canoe. At the next instant the girl arose and was seen gazing about her, like one assuring herself of her situation. A minute later, Hetty was seen on her knees in the other end of the canoe, repeating the prayers that had been taught her in childhood by a misguided but repentant mother. As Hutter laid down the glass, still drawn to its focus, the serpent raised it to his eyes and turned it towards the canoe. It was the first time he had ever used such an instrument, and Hist understood by his "hoof," the expression of his face, and his entire mane, that something wonderful had excited his admiration. It is well known that the Native American, more particularly those of superior characters and stations, singularly maintain their self-possession and stoicism in the midst of the flood of marvels that present themselves in their occasional visits to the abodes of civilization, and Chingachgook had imbibed enough of this impassibility to suppress any very undignified manifestation of surprise. With Hist, however, no such law was binding, and when her lover managed to bring the glass in a line with the canoe, and her eye was applied to the smaller end, the girl started back in alarm. Then she clapped her hands with delight, and a laugh, the usual attendant of untutored admiration, followed. A few minutes sufficed to enable this quick-witted girl to manage the instrument for herself, and she directed it at every prominent object that struck her fancy. Finding a rest in one of the windows, she and the Delaware first surveyed the lake, then the shores, the hills, and, finally, the castle attracted their attention. After a long, steady gaze at the latter, Hist took away her eye and spoke to her lover in a low, earnest manner. Chingachgook immediately placed his eye to the glass, and his look even exceeded that of his betrothed in length and intensity. Again they spoke together, confidentially, appearing to compare opinions, after which the glass was laid aside, and the young warrior quitted the cabin to join Hutter and Hurry. Oh my gosh. 35 heckin' months. Raven, that's crazy. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Thank you for the posture check. I'm gonna add a little stretch in with it. Just a little one. I can't stretch too much. Just a little bitty stretch. Okay. Okay. Define sagacity. The quality of being sage, wise, or able to make good decisions. The quality of being perceptible, astute, or insightful. Sagacity. That's a fun one. Thank you, thank you. The ark was slowly but steadily advancing, and the castle was materially within half a mile. Chingachgook joined the two white men in the stern of the scow. His manner was calm, but it was evident to the others, who were familiar with the habits of the natives, that he had something to communicate. Hurry was generally prompt to speak, and according to a custom, he took the lead on this occasion. "Out with it," he cried in his usual rough manner. "Have you discovered a chipmunk in a tree, or is there a salmon trout swimming under the bottom of the scow? You find what a settler can do in the way of eyes. Now, Sarpent, and mustn't wonder what they can see in the land of the natives from afar off." "No good to go to castle," put in Chingachgook with emphasis, the moment the other gave him the opportunity of speaking. "Huron there." "The devil he is! If this should turn out to be true, Floating Tom, a pretty trap were we about to pull down on our heads. Huron there. Well, this may be so, but no signs can I see of anything near or about the old hut, but logs, water, and bark, baiting 2 or 3 windows and 1 door." Hutter called for the glass, and took a careful survey of the spot, before he ventured an opinion at all. Then he somewhat cavalierly expressed his dissent from that given by the Delaware. "You've got this glass wrong end foremost, Delaware," continued Hurry. "Neither the old man nor I can see any trail in the lake." "No trail. Water make no trail," said Hist eagerly. "Stop boat. No go too near. Huron there." "Aye, that's it. Stick to the same tale and more people will believe you. I hope, Sarpent, you and your gal will agree in telling the same story arter marriage, as well as you do now. Huron there. Whereabouts is he to be seen? In the padlock? Or the chains? Or the logs? There isn't a gull in the colony that has a more lock-up look about it than old Tom's Shinette? Giant? I don't know what they're saying to me. Hold on. What is this word? Shiant. Shiant? What does that mean? What? Define it for me, please. No. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Define. No, not Chianti. All I'm getting is that it's a Spanish word or a French word, meaning boring. Chiant, I guess. I guess we'll go with Chiant. I guess. Okay. Then Tom's old Chiant, and I know something about gulls from experience. It was. You're right, you're right. No see moccasin, said Hist impatiently. Why no look and see him? Give me the glass, Harry, interrupted Hutter, and lower the sail. It is seldom that a Delaware woman meddles, and when she does, there is generally a cause for it. There is, truly, a moccasin floating against one of the piles, and it may or may not be a sign that the castle hasn't escaped visitors in our absence. Moccasins are no rarities, however, for I wear 'em myself, and Deerslayer wears 'em, and you wear 'em, March, and, for that matter, so does Hetty, quite as often as she wears shoes, though I never yet saw Judith trust her pretty foot in a moccasin. That was the wrong voice. When two people have names that are about the same length and they both start with the same letter and they both have double letters in their names, there's no hope for me getting them correctly. There's no hope. That was supposed to be Hutter, not Hurry. You'll never know. You'll never know, King Croaker. Annoying, boring, or a pain in the ass. Perfect. All three. Thank you. I appreciate you avoiding that for NPCs. It's and it's fine. Like people have names similar to each other all the time. That's just the way the world works. And when you're writing something, you can come up with other names. I'm not going to go back and read it though. You're going to have to imagine that an old man said that. Hurry had lowered the sail, and by this time the ark was within 200 yards of the castle, setting in, nearer and nearer, each moment, but at a rate too slow to excite any uneasiness. Each now took the glass in turn, and the castle, and everything near it, was subjected to a scrutiny still more rigid than ever. There the moccasin lay, beyond a question, floating so lightly and preserving its form so well that it was scarcely wet. It caught by a piece of the rough bark of one of the piles on the exterior of the water palisade that formed the dock already mentioned, which circumstance alone prevented it from drifting away before the air. There were many modes, however, of accounting for the presence of the moccasin, without supposing it to have been dropped by an enemy. It might have fallen from the platform, even when Hutter was in possession of the place, and drifted to the spot where it was now seen, remaining unnoticed until detected by the acute vision of Hist. It might have drifted from a distance, up or down the lake, and accidentally become attached to the pile or palisade. It might have been thrown from the window and alighted in that particular place, or it might certainly have fallen from a scout or an assailant during the past night who was obliged to abandon it to the lake in the deep obscurity which then prevailed. All these conjectures passed from Hutter to Hurry, the former appearing disposed to regard the omen as a little sinister, while the latter treated it with his usual reckless disdain. As for the Delaware, he was of opinion that the moccasin should be viewed as one would regard a trail in the woods, which might, or might not, equally prove to be threatening. Hist, however, had something available to propose. She declared her readiness to take a canoe, to proceed to the palisade, and bring away the moccasin, when its ornaments would show whether it came from the Canadas or not. Both the men were disposed to accept this offer, but the Delaware interfered to prevent the risk. If such a service was to be undertaken, it best become a warrior to expose himself in its execution, and he gave his refusal to let his betrothed proceed, much in the quiet but brief manner in which a native husband issues his commands. I'm gonna be careful on who's speaking this. Mary Jane Hollow, good to see you. Hurry is saying this. Got it. Well then, Delaware. Go yourself if you're so tender of your squaw, put in the unceremonious Hurry. That moccasin must be had, or Floating Tom will keep off, here, at arm's length, till the hearth cools in his cabin. It's but a little deerskin, arter all, and cut this away or that away, it's not a scarecrow to frighten true hunters from their game. What say you? Sarpent. Shall you or I canoe it? Let settler go. Better eyes than... Let me go. Better eyes than pale face. No Huron trick better. You. That I'll gainsay, to the hour of my death. A settler's eyes and a settler's nose, and for that matter his sight and ears are all better than a native's when fairly tried. Time and again have I put that to the proof, and what is proved is sartain. Still, I suppose the poorest vagabond going, whether Delaware or Huron, can find his way to yonder hut and back again, and so, sarpent, use your paddle, and welcome. Chingachgook was already in the canoe, and he dipped the implement the other named into the water, just as Hurry's limber tongue ceased. Watawa saw the departure of her warrior on this occasion with the submissive silence of an indigenous girl, but with most of the misgivings and apprehensions of her sex. Throughout the whole of the night, and down to the moment when they used the glass together in the hut, Chingachgook had manifested as much manly tenderness towards his betrothed as one of the most refined sentiment could have shown under similar circumstances. But now every sign of weakness was lost in an appearance of stern resolution, although Hist timidly endeavored to catch his eye as the canoe left the side of the ark. The pride of a warrior would not permit him to meet her fond and anxious looks. The canoe departed, and not a wandering glance rewarded her solicitude. Nor were the Delaware's care and gravity misplaced under the impressions with which he proceeded on his enterprise. If the enemy had really gained possession of the building, he was obliged to put himself under the very muzzles of their rifles, as it were, and this too without the protection of any of that cover which forms so essential an ally in indigenous warfare. It is scarcely possible to conceive of a service more dangerous, and had the serpent been fortified by the experience of 10 more years, or had his friend the Deerslayer been present, it would never have been attempted, the advantages in no degree compensating for the risk. But the pride of a Delaware chief was acted on by the rivalry of color, and it is not unlikely that the presence of the very creature from whom his ideas of manhood prevented his receiving a single glance, overflowing as he was with a love she so well merited, and no small influence on his determination. Chingachgook paddled steadily towards the palisades, keeping his eyes on the different loops of the building. Each instant he expected to see the muzzle of a rifle protruded, or to hear its sharp crack. But he succeeded in reaching the piles in safety. Here he was, in a measure, protected, having the heads of the palisades between him and the hut, and the chances of any attempt on his life while thus covered were greatly diminished. The canoe had reached the piles with its head inclining northward, and at a short distance from the moccasin, instead of turning to pick up the ladder, the Delaware slowly made the circuit of the whole building, deliberately examining every object that should betray the presence of enemies or the commission of violence. Not a single sign could he discover, however, to confirm the suspicions that had been awakened. The stillness of desertion pervaded the building. Not a fastening was displaced. Not a window had been broken. The door looked as secure as at the hour when it was closed by Hutter, and even the gate of the dock had all the customary fastenings. In short, the most wary and jealous eye could detect no other evidence of the visit of enemies than that which was connected with the appearance of the floating moccasin. The Delaware was now greatly at a loss how to proceed. At one moment, as he came round in front of the castle, he was on the point of stepping up on the platform and of applying his eye to one of the loops, with a view of taking a direct personal inspection of the state of things within. But he hesitated. Though of little experience in such matters himself, he had heard so much of indigenous artifices through traditions, had listened with such breathless interest to the narration of the escapes of the elder warriors, and, in short, was so well schooled in the theory of his calling that it was almost as impossible for him to make any gross blunder on such an occasion as it was for a well-grounded scholar, who had commenced correctly, to fail in solving his problem in mathematics, relinquishing the momentary intention to land. The chief slowly pursued his course round the palisade. As he approached the moccasin, having now nearly completed the circuit of the building, he threw the ominous article into the canoe by a dexterous and almost imperceptible movement of his paddle. He was now ready to depart, but retreat was even more dangerous than the approach, as the eye could no longer be riveted on loops, if there was really anyone in the castle. The motive of the Delaware in reconnoitering must be understood, and it was the wisest way, however perilous it might be, to retire with an air of confidence, as if all distrust were terminated by the examination. Such, accordingly, was the course adopted by Delaware, who paddled deliberately away, taking the direction of the ark, suffering no nervous impulse to quicken the motions of his arms, or to induce him to turn even a furtive glance behind him. I don't remember where all my dots are, so I have to be careful. No tender wife, reared in the refinement of the highest civilization, ever met a husband on his return from the field with more of sensibility in her countenance than Hist discovered, as she saw the great serpent of the Delaware step, unharmed, into the ark. Still, she repressed her emotion, though the joy that sparkled in her dark eyes and the smile that lighted her pretty mouth spoke a language that her betrothed could understand. "Well, Sarpent," cried Hurry, always the first to speak, "what news from the muskrats? Did they shew their teeth as you surrounded their dwelling?" "I no like him," sententiously returned the Delaware. "Too still, so still, can see silence." "As if anything could make less noise than nothing. If you've no better reason than this to give, old Tom had better hoist his sails and go and get his breakfast under his own roof. What has become of the moccasin?" "Here," returned Chingachgook, holding up his prize for the general inspection. The moccasin was examined, and Hist confidently pronounced it to be Huron by the manner in which the porcupine's quills were arranged on its front. Hutter and the Delaware, too, were decidedly of the same opinion. Admitted all this, however, it did not necessarily follow that its owners were in the castle. The moccasin might have drifted from a distance, or it might have fallen from the foot of some scout who had quitted the place when his errand was accomplished. In short, it explained nothing, while it awakened so much distrust. Under the circumstances, Hutter and Hurry were not men to be long deterred from proceeding by proofs as slight as that of the moccasin. They hoisted the sail again, and the ark was soon in motion, heading towards the castle. The wind or air continued light, and the movement was sufficiently slow to allow of a deliberate survey of the building as the scow approached. Mac, hello, so good to see you. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, thank you. I have to be very careful because the antlers are not very secure feeling. So I'm trying really hard like not to move too much, at least not move my head too much. But they're there. They're there. Oh, I have an itch right on the edge of my nose. Oh no. Okay, we're good. The same death-like silence reigned, and it was difficult to fancy that anything possessing animal life could be in or around the place. Unlike the serpent, whose imagination had acted through his traditions until he was ready to perceive in artificial, in a natural stillness, the others saw nothing to apprehend in a tranquillity that, in truth, merely denoted the repose of inanimate objects. The accessories of the scene, too, were soothing and calm rather than exciting. Day had not yet advanced so far as to bring the sun above the horizon, but the heavens, the atmosphere, and the woods and lake were all seen under that softened light which immediately precedes his appearance, and which perhaps is the most witching hour of the 24 hours. It is the moment when everything is distinct, even the atmosphere, seeming to possess a liquid lucidity, the hues appearing gray and softened, with the outlines of objects defined, and the perspective just as moral truths that are presented in their simplicity, without the meretricious aids of ornament or glitter. In a word, it is the moment when the senses seem to recover their powers in the simplest and most accurate forms, like the mind emerging from the obscurity of doubts into the tranquillity and peace of demonstration. Most of the influence that such a scene is apt to produce on those who are properly constituted in a moral sense was lost on Hutter and Hurry. But both the Delawares, though too much accustomed to witness the loveliness of morning tide, stop to analyze their feelings, were equally sensible of the beauties of the hour, though it was probably in a way unknown to themselves. It disposed the young warrior to peace, and never had he felt less longing for the glory of the combat than when he joined Hist in the cabin, the instant the scow rubbed against the side of the platform. From the indulgence of such gentle emotions, however, he was aroused by a rude summons from Hurry, who called on him to come forth and help to take in the sail and to secure the ark. Chingachgook obeyed, and by the time he had reached the head of the scow, Hurry was on the platform, stamping his feet, like one glad to touch that, by comparison, might be called terra firma, and proclaiming his indifference to the whole Huron tribe in his customary, noisy, dogmatical manner. Hutter had hauled a canoe up to the head of the scow and was already about to undo the fastenings of the gate in order to enter within the dock. March had no other motive in landing than a senseless bravado, and having shaken the door in a manner to put its solidarity to the proof, he joined Hutter in the canoe and began to aid him in opening the gate. The reader will remember that this mode of entrance was rendered necessary by the manner in which the owner of this singular residence habitually secured it, whenever it was left empty, more particularly at moments when danger was apprehended. Hutter had placed a line in the Delaware's hand on entering the canoe, intimating that the other was to fasten the ark to the platform and to lower the sail. Instead of following these directions, however, Chingachgook left the sail standing, and throwing the bight of the rope over the head of the pile, he permitted the ark to drift round until it lay against the defenses, in a position where it could be entered only by means of a boat or by passing along the summits of the palisades, the latter being an exploit that required some command of the feet, and which was not to be attempted in the face of a resolute enemy. The consequence of this change in the position of the scow, which was effected before Hutter had succeeded in opening the gate of his dock, the ark and the castle lay, as sailors would express it, kept asunder, nope, yard arm and yard arm, kept asunder some 10 or 12 feet by means of the piles. As the scow pressed close against the latter, their tops formed a species of breastwork that rose to the height of a man's head, covering in a certain degree the parts of the scow that were not protected by the cabin. The Delaware surveyed this arrangement with great satisfaction, and, as the canoe of Hutter passed through the gate into the dock, he thought that he might defend his position against any garrison in the castle for a sufficient time, could he but have had the helping arm of his friend Deerslayer. As it was, he felt comparatively secure, and no longer suffered the keen apprehensions he had lately experienced in behalf of Hist. A single shove sent the canoe from the gate to the trap beneath the castle. Here Hutter found all fast, neither padlock nor chain nor bar having been molested. The key was produced, the locks removed, the chain loosened, and the trap pushed upward. Hurry now thrust his head in at the opening. The arms followed, and the colossal legs rose without any apparent effort. At the first instant, his heavy foot was heard stamping in the passage above, that which separated the chambers of the father and daughter, and into which the trap opened. He then gave a shout of triumph. "Come on, old Tom," the reckless woodsman called out from within the building. "Here's your tenement, safe and sound. Aye, and as empty as a nut that has passed half an hour in the paws of a squirrel. The Delaware brags of being able to see silence. Let him come here, and he may feel it in the bargain." "Any silence where you are, Hurry Harry," returned Hutter, thrusting his head in at the hole as he uttered the last words, which instantly caused his voice to sound smothered to those without. "Any silence where you are ought to be seen and felt, for it's unlike any other silence. Come, come, old fellows, hoist yourself up, and we'll open doors and windows and let in the fresh air and brighten up matters. Few words in troublesome times make men in the best friends. Your daughter Judith is what I call a misbehaving young woman, and the hold of the whole family on me is so much weakened by her late conduct that it wouldn't take a speech as long as the 10 Commandments to send me off to the river, leaving you and your traps, your ark and your children, your manservants and your maidservants, your oxen and your asses, to fight this battle with the Iroquois by yourselves. Open that window, Floating Tom, and I'll blunder through and do the same job to the front door." A moment of silence succeeded, and a noise like that produced by the fall of a heavy body followed. A deep excretion from Hurry succeeded, and then the whole interior of the building seemed alive. The noises that now so suddenly, and we may add so unexpectedly even to the Delaware, broke the stillness within, could not be mistaken. They resembled those that would be produced by a struggle between tigers in a cage. Once or twice the native yell was given, but it seemed smothered, as if it proceeded from exhausted or compressed throats, and, in a single instant, a deep and another shockingly revolting excretion came from the throat of Hurry. It appeared as if the bodies were constantly thrown upon the floor with violence, as often rising to renew the struggle. Chingachgook felt greatly at a loss what to do. He had all the arms in the ark, Hutter and Hurry having proceeded without their rifles, but there was no means of using them or of passing them to the hands of their owners. The combatants were literally caged, rendering it almost as impossible under the circumstances to get out as to get into the building. Then there was Hist to embarrass his movements and to cripple his efforts. With a view to relieve himself from his disadvantage, he told the girl to take the remaining canoe and to join Hutter's daughters, who were incautiously but deliberately approaching, in order to save herself and to warn the others of their danger. But the girl positively and firmly refused to comply. At that moment, no human power, short of an exercise of superior physical force, could have induced her to quit the Ark. The exigency of the moment did not admit of delay, and the Delaware, seeing no possibility of serving his friends, cut the line, and by a strong shove forced the scow some 20 feet clear of the piles. Here, he took the sweeps and succeeded in getting a short distance to windward, if any direction could be thus termed in so light an air. But neither the time nor his skill at the oars allowed the distance to be great. When he ceased rowing, the Ark might have been 100 yards from the platform, and half that distance to the southward of it, the sail being lowered. Judith and Hetty had now discovered that something was wrong, and were stationary 1,000 feet farther north. All this while, the furious struggle continued within the house. In scenes like these, events thicken in less time than they can be related. From the moment when the first fall was heard within the building to that when the Delaware ceased his awkward attempts to row, it might have been 3 or 4 minutes, but it had evidently served to weaken the combatants. The oars and excretions of hurry were no longer heard, and even the struggles had lost some of their force and fury. Nevertheless, they still continued with unabated perseverance. At this instant the door flew open, and the fight was transferred to the platform, the light, and the open air. A Huron had undone the fastenings of the door, and 3 or 4 of his tribe rushed after him upon the narrow space, as if glad to escape from some terrible scene within. The body of another followed, pitched headlong through the door with terrific violence. Then March appeared, raging like a lion at bay, and for an instant freed from his numerous enemies. Hutter was already a captive and bound. There was now a pause in the struggle, which resembled a lull in a tempest. The necessity of breathing was common to all, and the combatants stood watching each other, like mastiffs that have been driven from their holds and are waiting for a favorable opportunity of renewing them. We shall profit by this pause to relate the manner in which the natives had obtained possession of the castle, and this the more willingly, because it may be necessary to explain to the reader why a conflict which had been so close and fierce should have also been so comparatively bloodless. Rivenoak and his companion, particularly the latter who had appeared to be a subordinate, and occupied solely with his raft, had made the closest observations in their visits to the castle. Even the boy had brought away minute and valuable information. By these means the Hurons obtained a general idea of the manner in which the place was constructed and secured, as well as of details that enabled them to act intelligently in the dark. Notwithstanding the care that Hutter had taken to drop the Ark on the east side of the building when he was in the act of transferring the furniture from the former to the latter, he had been watched in a way to render the precaution useless. Scouts were on the lookout on the eastern as well as the western shore of the lake, and the whole proceeding had been noted. As soon as it was dark, rafts, like that already described, approached from both shores to reconnoiter, and the Ark had passed within 50 feet of one of them without its being discovered. The men it held lying at their length on the logs, so as to blend themselves and their slow-moving machine with the water. When these two sets of adventurers drew near the castle, they encountered each other, And after communicating their respective observations, they unhesitatingly approached the building. As had been expected, it was found empty. The rats were immediately sent for a reinforcement to the shore, and 2 of the enemy remained to profit by their situation. These men succeeded in getting on the roof, and by removing some of the bark, in entering what might be termed the garret. Here, they were found by their companions. Hatchets now opened a hole through the squared logs of the upper floor, through which no less than 8 of the most athletic of the natives dropped into the rooms beneath. Here they were left, well supplied with arms and provisions, either to stand a siege or to make a sortie, as the case might require. The night was passed in sleep, as is usual with natives in a state of inactivity. The returning day brought them a view of the approach of the ark through the loops, and the only manner in which light and air were now admitted, the windows being closed most effectually with plank rudely fashioned to fit. As soon as it was ascertained that the 2 settlers were about to enter by the trap, the chief who directed the proceedings of the Hurons took his measures accordingly. He removed all the arms from his own people, even to the knives, in distrust of the enemy ferocity when awakened by personal injuries. And he hid them where they could not be found without a search. Ropes of bark were then prepared, and taking their stations in the 3 different rooms, they all waited for the signal to fall upon their intended captives. As soon as the party had entered the building, men without replaced the bark of the roof, removed every sign of their visit with care, and then departed for the shore. It was one of these who had dropped his moccasin, which he had not been able to find again in the dark. Had the death of the girl been known, it is probable nothing could have saved the lives of Hurry and Hutter. But that event occurred after the ambush was laid, and at a distance of several miles from the encampment near the castle. Such were the means that had been employed to produce the state of things we shall continue to describe. End of chapter 19. All right, so as we probably already guessed, the dead lady native from our previous reading was, of course, from Hurry. Of course it was. Of course it was. Why? Because he thought he heard something. He thought he heard something, he thought he saw something, so he shot before asking any questions or investigating at all and killed her. And so now they are back on the boat, they being Hurry, Hutter, Chingachgook, and Watawa. They're back on the ark and they are going towards the castle, which Judith and Hetty are also headed there, but on the canoe. So in the ark, they're on their way, and something doesn't feel right with between or something doesn't feel right. Chingachgook and Watawa are like, I don't think we should go in there. It feels like a trap. Like, I can feel it. She can feel it. There's a moccasin over there. And Hutter is a little impatient. He's like, we all wear moccasins. Judith wears moccasins. Like, it could have come from anywhere. It doesn't mean that there's, like, a trap there. And so, Chingachgook paddles out, looks around a little bit, grabs the moccasin, brings it back, and wouldn't you know, it is definitely a Huron moccasin, who is our enemies at this point. And they still continue to go to the Ark, to the castle, all of them. And it is secured exactly as it was before, as if nobody has entered it. And so they're like, these idiots, they don't know anything. What they can hear silence, that doesn't make any sense, blah blah blah. And so they go in there, and wouldn't you know it, they are seized by Hurons. And then we get like a little backpedaling. Our author does a little backpedaling to be like, you're probably wondering, good reader, how this happened. And so he explains how Riven Oak and some of his companions got into the castle. And it is noted that this has nothing to do with the life that Hurry has just taken. If it did, then Hurry and Harry definitely would have been killed. They don't know that Hurry has killed a member of their tribe. This is for something completely different. So, great. 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 Before we get into the next chapter, though, let's take a bio break. Let's take a bio break, and then when we come back, we'll hop into chapter 20. Yeah, that feels good and right. I'll get some more water, maybe some oats. What else do deer eat? Apples, some bark. All right, be right back. Just a little shorty break. Just a little shorty guy. I ate a piece of cheese. It was delightful. I still have my water. I don't think I drank enough water in the first time because, like, I didn't even drink 2 ounces. Terrible. Terrible. Oats. I do love oats. I eat them several times a week. Roar, hello, welcome in. Good to see you. Deers like cheese. Obviously. Duh. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Obviously, deers like cheese. All right. I was gonna say, once again, we only have what time for like one more chapter. I was thinking maybe we'll crowbar in another one. Not today. I'm not feeling like crowbarring in another chapter today. We're about to start chapter 20, and there are 32 chapters. We are more than 60% of the way through. So we're doing it. We're moving right along. After today, we have maybe 5 more. 5 more sits. 5 more reads. Maybe we'll crowbar in 3 chapters tomorrow. We'll do that. We'll do that when my back isn't feeling quite so decrepit. Isn't feeling quite so decrepit. I did turn my fan off, thinking that I would be okay. I'm not. I need this back on. This coat is like an actual coat that you would wear outside when it's cold outside. So it's very warm. But it's like furry, so like you have to wear it because deer, obviously. Obviously. All right, one more sip, and then we will go ahead and get started. Yeah, hurry. I just saw your comment now. Hurry is definitely making things just more complicated, as usual, more complicated than it needs to be. Once again, hurry is getting in the way. Think snowman weather. There we go. That'll help. That'll help. Deerfest. An Alan Wake reference. See, haven't played it. Wouldn't know. Wouldn't know. Something that I did play, I don't know if I told you all, but I did play for the first time The Last of Us Part 1. I really liked it. I really liked it. I'd already seen the show, so I'd played it after seeing the first season, but I want to play the second one before watching the second season. And I don't know anything that happens in the second season or in the second game. So, and I'm hoping to keep it that way until I play it. But yeah, my plan is to play the second game and then hop into the second season. I think it doesn't go like the second season doesn't go as far. Like the second game is longer than the second season. But I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure. An interesting time. Ooh, I do enjoy that. I'm excited for that. I'm excited. And even though I already knew what was going to happen in the game because I had watched the show, it still hits so good. It still hits so good. Like I'm still frustrated with characters that I was frustrated with. And I'm still like sad in parts where like I was sad when I watched it. And it's very different watching something than like you doing it like in the game. Like you are the one who's taking down these people or these clickers or whatever it is. It's very different experience and that's really fun. Anyway, that's my little aside. Which cheese is best cheese? Great question. If we're talking about like melting, then I love Chihuahua cheese. Oof. Oof. If we're talking just eating cheese, I love a good brie, like brie and tomatoes. That's delightful. If we're talking like pizza, I mean Mott's is always delightful. Mm. It became, oh, the biggest twist leaked. Okay, and I'm glad that I didn't see it. I don't know what it is. I'm so glad. I'm so glad. Brie is one of the best ones for sure. Yeah, yeah. Last of Us Part 2 is your favorite game of 2020. Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. 2020, what did I play? What kept me together besides Animal Crossing, which I feel like kept a lot of people together. The Amazing Spider-Man. That game really did it for me during that time. The Last of Us is where the punch in the air meme originates. Oh, it is very easy to punch the air. It is very easy to punch the air in the game. And I didn't play it. Okay, we're gonna talk about this for like 2 more minutes and then we'll go on. But I took a break when playing it because I got frustrated because I couldn't figure out where I was supposed to go in this one part. And it was just really overwhelming. A lot of the enemies and I just couldn't figure it out. So instead of getting just like really mad and never playing it again, I just like put it down for like a month or two, something like that. I put it down for a while. And then when I came back to it, I forgot how to do a lot of basic things like take out my weapons. And so I'm in this area with a ton of clickers and I still don't know where I'm going and I can't figure out how to take my gun out. And so I'm sneaking around, but they eventually like it's part of the game where they just like know that you're there no matter where you're sneaking to. And so I can't take my gun out and I just start punching everybody. I just start punching all of the clickers. I just I just do it. I kick some of them. Like it was great. If you're really close to a wall, then you like slam them into a wall. I just couldn't remember how to take my weapons out. I couldn't remember how to use any of my weapons. And I was like, great, cool. It works, in case you were wondering. It's a little slower, but it works. You might have to run around a little bit more. Thank you for the hydrate. You beat The Last of Us 1 twice, with the second time you beat on hard mode before part 2 came out. That's amazing. Why are they milking chihuahuas for cheese? I mean, when you've had chihuahua cheese, you'll know why. You'll know exactly why. Also, that visual is hilarious. Okay, now we can be done. Now we can move on. Chapter 20. Now all is done that man can do, and all is done in vain. My love, my native land, adieu, for I must cross the main. My dear, for I must cross the main. Robert Burns. It was for our rightful king. 2, lines 7 through 12. My dear, for I must cross the main. That's me crossing the main as a deer, in case you were wondering. The last chapter we left the combatants breathing in their narrow lists, accustomed to the rude sports of wrestling and jumping, then so common in America, more especially on the frontiers. Hurry possessed an advantage, in addition to his prodigious strength that had rendered the struggle less unequal than it might otherwise appear to be. It's going on only, dear. I'm not going to look that up. I was like, is that a real thing? Because I kind of want it to be, and I'm not going to look it up. My algorithm is already messed up from the things that I looked up for for streams, so I'm not looking that up. You can't make me. This alone had enabled him to hold out so long against so many enemies. For the native is by no means remarkable for his skill, nor force in athletic exercise. As yet, no one had been seriously hurt, though several of the enemies had received severe falls, and he, in particular, who had been thrown bodily upon the platform, might be said to be temporarily hors de combat. Some of the rest were limping, and March himself had not entirely escaped from bruises, though want of breath was the principal loss that both sides wished to repair. Under circumstances like those in which the parties were placed, a truce, let it come from what cause it might, could not well be of long continuance. The arena was too confined, and the distrust of treachery too great, to admit of this. Contrary to what might be expected in his situation, Hurry was the first to recommence hostilities. Whether this proceeded from policy, an idea that he might gain some advantage by making a sudden and unexpected assault, or was the fruit of irritation and his undying hatred of a native, it is impossible to say. His onset was furious, however, and at first carried all before it. He seized the nearest Huron by the waist, raised him entirely from the platform, and hurled him into the water as if he had been a child. In half a minute, 2 more were at his side, one of whom received a grave injury by the friend who had just preceded him. But 4 enemies remained, and, in a hand-to-hand conflict, in which no arms were used but those which nature had furnished, Hurry believed himself fully capable to cope with that number of enemies. For dozing heat, only deers. Have you ever seen the commercial? What was it for? Farmers Only? Is that what it was called? Because city folk just don't understand. Yeah, farmers only. That's what that reminds me of. For dozing heat, only deers. I looked it up. I shouldn't have looked that up. Now I'm gonna start getting like dating services on my computer. City folk just don't get it. I remember those commercials. I just thought they were so funny. Hurrah, old Tom, he shouted. The rascals are taken to the lake, and I'll soon have 'em all swimmin'. As these words were uttered, a violent kick in the face sent back an injured native, who had caught at the edge of the platform and was endeavoring to raise himself to its level, helplessly and hopelessly, into the water. When the affray was over, his dark body was seen through the limpid element of the glimmering glass, lying with outstretched arms extended on the bottom of the shawl on which the castle stood, clinging to the sands and weeds as if life were to be retained by his frenzied grasp of death. A blow sent into the pit of another's stomach doubled him up like a worm that had been trodden on, and but two able-bodied foes remained to be dealt with. One of these, however, was not only the largest and strongest of the Hurons, but he was also the most experienced of their warriors present, and that one whose sinews were best strung in fights and by marches on the warpath. This man fully appreciated the gigantic strength of his opponent and had carefully husbanded his own. He was also equipped in the best manner for such a conflict, standing in nothing but his breechcloth, the model of a naked and beautiful statue of agility and strength. To grasp him required additional dexterity and unusual force. Still, Hurry did not hesitate. But the kick that had actually destroyed one fellow creature was no sooner given than he closed in with his formidable antagonist, endeavoring to force him into the water also. The struggle that succeeded was truly frightful. So fierce did it immediately become, and so quick and changeful were the evolutions of the athletes, that the remaining enemy had no chance for interfering, had he possessed the desire. But wonder and apprehension held him spellbound. He was an inexperienced youth, and his blood curdled as he witnessed the fell strife of human passions. Exhibited, too, in an unaccustomed form. Hurry first attempted to throw his antagonist. With his view, he seized him by the throat and an arm, and tripped with the quickness and force of an American borderer. The effect was frustrated by the agile movements of Huron, who had closed to grasp by, and whose feet avoided the attempt with a nimbleness equal to that with which it was made. Then followed a sort of melee, if such a term can be applied to a struggle between two in which no efforts were strictly visible, the limbs and bodies of the combatants assuming so many attitudes and contortions as to defeat observation. This confused but fierce rally lasted less than a minute, however, when Hurry, furious at having his strength baffled by the agility and nakedness of his foe, made a desperate effort, which sent the Huron from him, hurling his body violently against the logs of the hut. The concussion was so great as momentarily to confuse the latter's faculties. The pain, too, extorted a deep groan, in unusual concession to agony, to escape a native in the heat of battle. Still, he rushed forward again to meet his enemy, conscious that his safety rested on its resolution. Hurry now seized the other by the waist, raised him bodily from the platform, and fell with his own great weight on the form beneath. This additional shock so stunned the sufferer that his gigantic white opponent now had him completely at his mercy. Passing his hands around the throat of his victim, he compressed them with the strength of a vice, fairly doubling the head of the Huron over the edge of the platform until the chin was uppermost, with the infernal strength he expended. An instant sufficed to show the consequences. The eyes of the sufferer seemed to start forward, his tongue protruded, and his nostrils dilated nearly to splitting. At this instant, a rope of bark, having an eye, was passed dexterously within the two arms of Hurry. The end threaded the eye, forming a noose, and his elbows were drawn together behind his back with a power that all his gigantic strength could not resist. Reluctantly, even under such circumstances, did the exasperated borderer see his hands drawn from their deadly grasp, for all the evil passions were then in the ascendant. Almost at the same instant, a similar fastening secured his ankles, and his body was rolled to the center of the platform as helplessly and as cavalierly as it were a log of wood. His rescued antagonist, however, did not rise, for while he began again to breathe, his head still hung helplessly over the edge of the logs, and it was thought at first that his neck was dislocated. He recovered, gradually only, and it was hours before he could walk. Some fancied that neither his body nor his mind ever totally recovered from this near approach to death. Hurry owed his defeat and capture to the intensity with which he had concentrated all his powers on his fallen foe. While thus occupied, the two natives he had hurled into the water mounted to the heads of the piles along which they passed and joined their companion on the platform. The latter had so far rallied his faculties as to have gotten the ropes, which were in readiness for use as the others appeared, and they were applied in the manner related, as Hurry lay pressing his enemy down with his whole weight, intent only on the horrible office of strangling him. Thus were the tables turned in a single moment. He who had been so near achieving a victory that would have been renowned for ages, by means of traditions, throughout all that region, lying helpless, bound, and a captive. So fearful had been the efforts of the settler, and so prodigious of the strength he exhibited, that even as he lay tethered like a sheep before them, they regarded him with respect, and not without dread. The helpless body of their stoutest warrior was still stretched on the platform, and, as they cast their eyes towards the lake in quest of the comrade that had been hurled into it so unceremoniously, and of whom they had lost sight in the confusion of the fray, they perceived his lifeless form clinging to the grass on the bottom, as already described. These several circumstances contributed to render the victory of the Hurons almost as astonishing to themselves as a defeat. Chingachgook and his betrothed witnessed the whole of this struggle from the ark. When the three Hurons were about to pass the cords around the arms of the prostrate Hurry, the Delaware sought his rifle. But before he could use it, the settler was bound, and the mischief was done. He might still bring down an enemy, but to obtain the scalp was impossible, and the young chief, who would so freely risk his own life to obtain such a trophy, hesitated about taking that of a foe without such an object in view. A glance at Hist, and the recollection of what might follow, checked any transient wish for revenge. The reader has been told that Chingachgook could scarcely be said to know how to manage the oars of the ark at all, however expert he may be in the use of the paddle. Perhaps there is no manual labor at which men are so bungling and awkward as in their first attempts to pull oar, even the experienced mariner or boatman breaking down in his efforts to figure with the celebrated rollock of the gondolier. In short, it is, temporarily, an impracticable thing for a new beginner to succeed with a single oar. But in this case, it was necessary to handle two of the same time, and those of great size. Sweeps, or large oars, however, are sooner rendered of use by the raw hand than lighter implements, and this was the reason that the Delaware had succeeded in moving the ark as well as he did in a first trial. The trial, notwithstanding, sufficed to produce distrust, and he was fully aware of the critical situation in which Hist and himself were now placed, should the Hurons take to the canoe that was still lying beneath the trap and come against them. At the moment he thought of putting Hist into the canoe in his own possession, and of taking to the eastern mountain in the hope of reaching the Delaware village by direct flight. But many considerations suggested themselves to put a stop to this indiscreet step. It was almost certain that scouts watched the lake on both sides, and no canoe could possibly approach shore without being seen from the hills. Then a trail could not be concealed from indigenous eyes, and the strength of Hist was unequal to the flight sufficiently sustained to outstrip the pursuit of trained warriors. This was a part of America in which the natives did not know the use of horses, and everything would depend on the physical energies of the fugitives. Last, but far from being least, were the thoughts connected with the situation of Deerslayer, a friend who was not to be deserted in his extremity. Hist, in some particulars, reasoned, and even felt, differently, though she arrived at the same conclusions. Her own anger disturbed her less than her concerns for the two sisters, on whose behalf her womanly sympathies were now strongly enlisted. The canoe of the girls, by the time the struggle on the platform had ceased, was within 300 yards of the castle, and here Judith ceased paddling, the evidences of strife first becoming apparent to the eyes. She and Hetty were standing erect, anxiously endeavoring to ascertain what had occurred, but unable to satisfy their doubts from the circumstance that the building, in a great measure, concealed the scene of action. The parties in the ark and in the canoe were indebted to the ferocity of Hurry's attack for their momentary security. In any ordinary case, the girls would have been immediately captured, a measure easy of execution now the enemies had canoe, were it not for the rude check the audacity of the Hurons had received in the recent struggle. It required some little time to recover from the effects of this violent scene, and this so much the more because the principal man of the party, in the way of personal prowess at least, had been so great a sufferer. Still it was of the last importance that Judith and her sister should seek immediate refuge in the ark, where the defenses offered a temporary shelter at least, and the first step was to devise the means of inducing them to do so. Hist showed herself in the stern of the scow, and made many gestures and signs, in vain, in order to induce the girls to make a circuit to avoid the castle, and to approach the ark from the eastward. Were you struck by Automod? You were. There we go. Automod is like, don't you dare. Don't you dare. Mm-mm-mm. I lost my spot. I was too excited. That's okay. Did not appreciate the audacity. Not in the least. No. These signs were distrusted or misunderstood. It is probable Judith was not yet sufficiently aware of the real state of things to put full confidence in either party. Instead of doing as desired, she rather kept more aloof, paddling slowly back to the north or into the broadest part of the lake, where she could command the widest view and had the fairest field for flight before her. At this instant, the sun appeared above the pines of the eastern range of mountains, and a light, southerly breeze arose. as was usual enough at this season and hour. Chingachgook lost no time in hoisting the sail. Whatever might be in reserve for him, there could be no question that it was every way desirable to get the ark at such a distance from the castle as to reduce his enemies to the necessity of approaching the former in the canoe, which the chances of war had so inopportunely, for his wishes and security, thrown into their hands. The appearance of the opening duck seemed first to arouse the Hurons from their apathy, and by the time the head of the scow had fallen off before the wind, which it did unfortunately in the wrong direction, bringing it within a few yards of the platform, Hist found it necessary to warn her lover of the importance of covering his person against the rifles of his foes. This was a danger to be avoided under all circumstances, and so much the more because the Delaware found that Hist would not take the cover herself so long as he remained exposed. Accordingly, Chingachgook abandoned the scow to its own movements, forced Hist into the cabin, the doors of which he immediately secured, and then he looked about him for the rifles. The situation of the parties was now so singular as to merit a particular description. The ark was within 60 yards of the castle, a little to the southward or to the windward of it, with its sail full and the steering oar abandoned. The latter, fortunately, was loose, so that it produced no great influence on the crab-like movements of the unwieldy craft. The sail being, as sailors term it, flying, or having no braces, the air forced the yard forward, though both sheets were fast. The effect was threefold on a boat with a bottom that was perfectly flat, and which drew merely some 3 or 4 inches water. It pressed the head slowly round to leeward. It forced the whole fabric bodily in the same direction at the same time, and the water that unavoidably gathered under the lee gave the scow also a forward movement. All these changes were exceedingly slow, however, for the wind was not only light, but it was baffling as usual, and twice or thrice the sail shook. Once it was absolutely taken aback. Had there been any keel to the ark, it would inevitably have run afoul of the platform, bows on, when it is probable nothing could have prevented the Hurons from carrying it, more particularly as the sail would have enabled them to approach under cover. As it was, the scow wore slowly round, barely clearing that part of the building, the piles projecting several feet. They were not cleared, but the head of the slow-moving craft caught between 2 of them by one of its square corners and hung. At this moment, the Delaware was vigilantly watching through a loop for an opportunity to fire, while the Hurons kept within the building, similarly occupied. The exhausted warrior reclined against the hut, there having been no time to remove him, and Hurry lay, almost as helpless as a log, tethered like a sheep on its way to the slaughter, near the middle of the platform. Chingachgook could have slain first, at any moment, but his scalp would have been safe, and the young chief disdained to strike a blow that could lead to neither honor nor advantage. "Run out of one of the poles, Sarpent, if Sarpent you be," said Hurry, amid the groans that the tightness of the ligatures was beginning to extort from him. "Run out one of the poles and shove your head off the scow, and you'll drift clear of us, and, when you've done that good turn for yourself, just finish this gagging blackguard for me." The appeal of Hurry, however, had no other effect than to draw the attention of Hist to his situation. This quick-witted creature comprehended it at a glance. His ankles were bound with several turns of stout bark rope, and his arms, above the elbows, were similarly secured behind his back, barely leaving him a little play of the hands and wrists. Putting her mouth near a loop, she said in a low but distinct voice, "Why, you don't roll here and fall in scow. Chingachgook shoot Huron if ye chase." "By the Lord, gal, that's a judgmatical thought, and it shall be tried, if the starn of your scow will come a little nearer. Put a bed at the bottom for me to fall on." This was said at a happy moment, for, tired of waiting, all the natives made a rapid discharge of their rifles, almost simultaneously, injuring no one, though several bullets passed through the loops. Hist had heard part of Hurry's words, but most of what he said was lost in the sharp reports of the firearms. She undid the bar of the door that led to the stern of the scow, but did not dare to expose her person. At this time, the head of the ark hung, but by a gradually decreasing hold as the other end swung slowly round, nearer and nearer to the platform. Hurry, who now lay with his face towards the ark, occasionally writhing and turning over like one in pain, evolutions he had performed ever since he was secured, watched every change, and, at last, he saw that the whole vessel was free, and was beginning to grate slowly along the sides of the piles. The attempt was desperate, but it seemed to be the only chance for escaping torture and death, and it suited the reckless daring of the man's character. Waiting to the last moment, in order that the stern of the scow might fairly rub against the platform, he began to writhe again, as if in intolerable suffering, execrating all natives in general, and the Hurons in particular. And then he suddenly and rapidly rolled over and over, taking the direction of the stern of the scow. Unfortunately, Hurry's shoulders required more space to resolve in than his feet, and by the time he reached the edge of the platform, his direction had so far changed as to carry him clear of the ark altogether, and the rapidity of his revolutions and the emergency admitting of no delay, he fell into the water. At this instant, Chingachgook, by an understanding of his betrothed, drew the fire of the Hurons again. Not a man of whom saw the manner in which one whom they knew to be effectually tethered had disappeared. But Hist's feelings were strongly interested in the success of so bold a scheme, and she watched the movements of Hurry as the cat watches the mouse. The moment he was in motion, she foresaw the consequences, and this the more readily, as the scow was now beginning to move with some steadiness, and she bethought her of the means of saving him. With a sort of instinctive readiness, she opened the door at the very moment the rifles were ringing in her ears, and protected by the intervening cabin, she stepped into the stem of the scow in time to witness the fall of Hurry into the lake. Her foot was unconsciously placed on the end of one of the sheets of the sail, which was fastened aft, and catching up all the spare rope with the awkwardness, but also with the generous resolution of a woman, she threw it in the direction of the helpless Hurry. The line fell on the head and body of the sinking man, and he not only succeeded in grasping separate parts of it with his hands, but he actually got a portion of it between his teeth. Hurry was an expert swimmer, and tethered as he was, he resorted to the very expedient that philosophy and reflection could have suggested. The first time we've said expedient today. We've made it pretty far. I feel like recently we've said it very early on. We've made it pretty far. Okay, all right. He had fallen on his back, and instead of floundering and drowning himself by desperate efforts to walk on the water, he permitted his body to sink as low as possible, and was already submerged, with the exception of his face, when the line reached him. In this situation, he might possibly have remained until rescued by the Hurons, using his hands as fishes use their fins, had he received no other succor, but the movement of the ark soon tightened the rope, and of course he was dragged gently ahead, holding even pace with the scow. The motion aided in keeping his face above the surface of the water, and it would have been possible for one accustomed to endurance to have been toward a mile in this singular but simple manner. Thank you for the hydrate. I appreciate it. I feel like my antlers are falling. But that's as good as it's gonna get. It has been said that the Hurons did not observe the sudden disappearance of Hurry. In his present situation, he was not only hid from view by the platform, but, as the ark drew slowly ahead, impelled by a sail that was now filled, he received the same friendly service from the piles. The Hurons, indeed, were too intent on endeavoring to slay their Delaware foe by sending a bullet through one of the loops or crevices of the cabin, to bethink them at all of one whom they fancied so thoroughly tied. Their great concern was the manner in which the ark rubbed past the piles, although its motion was lessened at least one half by the friction, and they passed into the northern end of the castle in order to catch opportunities of firing through the loops of that part of the building. Not the antlers, no! Chingachgook was similarly occupied, and remained as ignorant as his enemies of the situation of Hurry. As the ark grated along, the rifles sent their little clouds of smoke from one cover to the other, but the eyes and movements of the opposing parties were too quick to permit any injury to be done. At length, one side had the mortification and the other the pleasure of seeing the scow swing clear of the piles altogether, when it immediately moved away, with a materially accelerated motion towards the north. Chingachgook now first learned from Hist the critical condition of Hurry. To have exposed either of their persons in the stern of the scow would have been certain death, but fortunately the sheet to which the man clung led forward to the foot of the sail. The Delaware found means to unloosen it from the cleat aft, and Hist, who was already forward for that purpose, immediately began to pull upon the line. Slantlers. It's more aerodynamic. Yeah, I can run faster this way. Hop fences a little bit easier. At this moment, Hurry was towing 50 or 60 feet astern, with nothing but his face above water. As he was dragged out clear of the castle and the piles, he was first perceived by the Hurons, who raised a hideous yell, and commenced a fire on what may very well be termed the floating mass. It was at the same instant that Hist began to pull upon the line forward, a circumstance that probably saved Hurry's life, aided by his own self-possession and border readiness. The first bullet struck the water directly on the spot where the broad chest of the young giant was visible through the pure element, and might have pierced his heart had the angle at which it was fired been less acute. Devin, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I mean, we're reading a book called Deerslayer, so obviously deer. Instead of penetrating the lake, however, it glanced from its smooth surface, rose and buried itself in the logs of the cabin near the spot at which Chingachgook had shown himself the minute before, while clearing the line from the cleat. A second, and a third, and a fourth bullet followed, all meeting with the same resistance of the water, though Hurry sensibly felt the violence of the blows that struck upon the lake so immediately above, and so near his breast. Discovering their mistake, the Hurons now changed their plan and aimed at the uncovered face. But by this time Hist was pulling on the line. The target advanced, and the deadly missiles still fell upon the water. In another moment, the body was dragged past the end of the scow and became concealed. As for the Delaware and Hist, they worked perfectly covered by the cabin, and in less time than it requires to tell it, they had hauled the huge frame of Harry to the place they occupied. Chingachgook stood in readiness with his keen knife, and bending over the side of the scow, he soon severed the bark that bound the limbs of the borderer. To raise him high enough to reach the edge of the boat and to aid him in entertaining were less easy, as Hurry's arms were still nearly useless. But both were done in time, when the liberated man staggered forward and fell exhausted and helpless into the bottom of the scow. Here we shall leave him to recover his strength and the due circulation of his blood, while we proceed with the narrative of events that crowd upon us too fast to admit any postponement. The moment the Hurons lost sight of the body of Hurry, they gave a common yell of disappointment, and 3 of the most active of their number ran to the trap and entered the canoe. It required some little delay, however, to embark with their weapons, to find the paddles, and, if we may use a phrase so purely technical, to get out of dock. By this time, Hurry was in the scow, and the Delaware had his rifle again in readiness. As the Ark necessarily sailed before the wind, it had got by this time quite 200 yards from the castle, and was sliding away each instant farther and farther, though with a motion so easy as scarcely to stir the water. The canoe of the girls was quite a quarter of a mile distant from the Ark, obviously keeping aloof, in ignorance of what had occurred, and in apprehension of the consequences of venturing too near. They had taken the direction of the eastern shore, endeavoring at the same time to get to windward of the Ark, and in a manner between the two parties, as if distrusting which was to be considered a friend and which an enemy. The girls, from long habit, used the paddles with great dexterity, and Judith, in particular, had often sportively gained races and trials of speed with the youths that occasionally visited the lake. When the 3 Hurons emerged from between the palisades and found themselves on the open lake, and under the necessity of advancing unprotected on the Ark, if they preserved in the original design, their ardor sensibly cooled. In a bark canoe, they were totally without cover, and indigenous discretion was entirely opposed to such a sacrifice of life as would most probably follow any attempt to assault an enemy entrenched as effectually as the Delaware. Instead of following the Ark, therefore, these 3 warriors inclined towards the eastern shore, keeping at a safe distance from the rifles of Chingachgook. But this maneuver rendered the position of the girls exceedingly critical. It threatened to place them, if not between 2 fires, at least between 2 dangers, or what they conceived to be dangers. And instead of permitting the Hurons to enclose her in what she fancied a sort of net, Judith immediately commenced her retreat in a southern direction, at no very great distance from the shore. She did not dare to land, if such an expedient were to be resorted to at all. She could only venture on it in the last extremity. At first, the natives paid little or no attention to the other canoe, for, fully apprised of its contents, they deemed its capture of comparatively little moment, while the Ark, with its imaginary treasures, the persons of the Delaware and of Hurry, and its means of movement on a large scale, was before them. This Ark had its dangers as well as its temptations, and after wasting near an hour in vacillating evolutions, always at a safe distance from the rifle, the Hurons seemed suddenly to take their resolution, and began to display it by giving eager chase to the girls. When this last design was adopted, the circumstances of all parties, as connected with their relative positions, were materially changed. The Ark had sailed and drifted quite half a mile, and was nearly that distance due north of the castle, as soon as the Delawares perceived that the girls avoided him, unable to manage his unwieldy craft, and knowing that flight from a bark canoe in the event of pursuit would be a useless expedient if attempted. He had lowered his sail, in the hope it might induce the sisters to change their plan and to seek refuge in the scow. This demonstration produced no other effect than to keep the Ark nearer to the scene of action and to enable those in her to become witnesses of the chase. The canoe of Judith was about a quarter of a mile south of that of the Hurons, a little nearer to the east shore, and about the same distance to the southward of the castle as it was from the hostile canoe, a circumstance which necessarily put the last nearly abreast of Hutter's fortress. With the several parties thus situated, the chase commenced. Stephen, hello. Thank you so much. Thank you. Good to see you. Welcome in. At the moment when the Hurons so suddenly changed their mode of attack, their canoe was not in the best possible racing trim. There were but 2 paddles, and the third man so much extra and useless cargo. Then the difference in weight between the sisters and the other 2 men were especially in vessels so extremely light, almost neutralized any difference that might proceed from the greater strength of the Hurons, and rendered the trial of speed far from being as unequal as it might seem. Judith did not commence her exertions until the near approach of the other canoe rendered the object of the movement certain, and then she exhorted Hetty to aid her with her utmost skill and strength. "Why should we run, Judith?" asked the simple-minded girl. "The Hurons have never harmed me, nor do I think they ever will." "That may be true, as to you, Hetty, but it will prove very different with me. Kneel down and say your prayer, and then rise and do your utmost to help escape. Think of me, dear girl, too, as you pray." Judith gave these directions from a mixed feeling. First, because she knew that her sister ever sought the support of her great ally in trouble, and next, because a sensation of feebleness and dependence suddenly came over her own proud spirit in that moment of apparent desertion and trial. The prayer was quickly said, however, and the canoe was soon in rapid motion. Still, neither party resorted to their greatest exertions from the outset, both knowing that the chase was likely to be arduous and long. Like 2 vessels of war that are preparing for an encounter, they seemed desirous of first ascertaining their prospective rates of speed, in order that they might know how to graduate their exertions previously to the great effort. A few minutes sufficed to show the Hurons that the girls were expert, and that it would require all their skill and energies to overtake them. Judith had inclined towards the eastern shore at the commencement of the chase, with a vague determination of landing and flying to the woods as a last resort, but as she approached the land, the certainty that scouts must be watching her movements made her reluctance to adopt such an expedient unconquerable. That's 3 times we've said expedient in this chapter, for those of us keeping track at home. Then she was still fresh and had sanguine hopes of being able to tire out her pursuers. With such feelings, she gave a sweep with her paddle and sheered off from the fringe of dark hemlocks beneath the shades of which she was so near entering, and held her way again, more towards the center of the lake. This seemed the instant favorable for the Hurons to make their push, as it gave them the entire breadth of the sheet to do it in. And this, too, in the widest part, as soon as they had got between the fugitives and the land. The canoes now flew, Judith making up for what she wanted in strength by her great dexterity and self-command. For half a mile, the natives gained no material advantage, but the continuance of so great exertions for so many minutes sensibly affected all concerned. Here, the natives resorted to an expedient that enabled them to give one of their party time to breathe, by shifting their paddles from hand to hand, and this too without sensibly relaxing their efforts. 4 times in this chapter we have said expedient. What is James Fenimore Cooper's favorite word? Did he just learn the word expedient and he's like, I'm going to use it and impress everybody, and so he's been constantly using it throughout this whole book? Maybe. But that's 4 times. This stream is sponsored by Expedia.com. What's the record? I wish that we were keeping track. Oh wait, hold on. Actually, hold up. Hold up. I can tell you how many times it says it in the whole book. But let's see. Oh my God. Are you kidding me? Okay, including expedient and expedients. Guess how many times it's used in this book? Just take a guess. Just take a wild guess. Okay, 80 is too high. But I like where you're headed. It's more than 25. 420. Oh wait, I lost it. 43 times. 69. Nice. 43 times. Expedient or expedients has been used in this book. You were close. You were close. Devin, you were also extremely close. Jeez. Why? Why? 43 times? They just learned this word. Yeah, let's see how many more we have in this chapter. I do think we've had more than 4 in a chapter. Definitely. That's way too many. That's way too many times. Pick a different word. Pick a different word, please. Okay. There's only a couple more, well, less than 50 minutes are left in this at our current reading speed. How many more times are we going to hit this word? Who's to say? Will we hit 5? Maybe. Maybe. Read harder. All right, let's see. Make a betting pool. Okay, tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll do a prediction. We'll do a prediction tomorrow to see how many times it comes up. I like where your head is at. I like where your head is at. We can do that. Tell the rest of the deers about it. They'll be hearing about this, don't you worry. Betty Pool should be a Deadpool variant. Okay, well, I've never been distracted in my life, and I just got a spoiler for myself. I just got a spoiler when I looked that up. Cool. I don't see one. I'm a living distraction. All right, all right. We're currently at 4, yes. Let's see if we have any more this chapter. Judith occasionally looked behind her, and she saw this expedient practiced. It caused her immediately to distrust the result, since her powers of endurance were not likely to hold out against those of men who had the means of relieving each other. Still, she persevered, allowing no very visible consequences immediately to follow the change. 5. We immediately got 5. Carnello, so good to see you. We have said the word expedient 5 times in this. Oh, no worry. No worries, King. No worries. Hands. We immediately got another expedient. Okay. Crazy. Crazy. Do we hear 6? Do we hear 6? And yet, as yet, the natives had not been able to get nearer to the girls than 200 yards, though they were what seamen would term in their wake, or in a direct line behind them, passing over the same track of water. This made the pursuit what is technically called a stern chase, which is proverbially a long chase, the meaning of which is that, in consequence of the relative positions of the parties, no change becomes apparent except that which is a direct gain in the nearest possible approach. At this rate, surprise, that's only 43. Yeah. Going once, going twice. Red Autumn, you heard me. You heard what I said. I don't remember the previous questionable phrasing of sentences we've had, but we've definitely had them. We've definitely had them. Long as this species of chase is admitted to be, however, Judith was enabled to perceive that the Hurons were sensibly drawing nearer and nearer before she had gained the center of the lake. She was not a girl to despair, but there was an instant when she thought of yielding, with the wish of being carried to the camp where she knew the Deerslayer to be a captive. But the considerations connected with the means she hoped to be able to employ in order to procure his release immediately interposed, in order to stimulate her to renewed exertions. Had there been anyone there to note the progress of the 2 canoes, he would have seen that of Judith flying swiftly away from its pursuers, as the girl gave it freshly impelled speed, while her mind was thus dwelling on her own ardent and generous schemes. So material, indeed, was the difference in the rate of going between the 2 canoes for the next 5 minutes, that the Hurons began to be convinced all their powers must be exerted, or they would suffer the disgrace of being baffled by women. Making a furious effort under the mortification of such a conviction, one of the strongest of their party broke his paddle at the very moment when he had taken it from the hand of a comrade to relieve him. This at once decided the matter. A canoe containing 3 men and having but 1 paddle being utterly unable to overtake fugitives like the daughters of Thomas Hutter. Ejaculating, yes. Ejaculating with pleasure. That's what it was. That's what we said last time. Yeah. Yeah. Excuse me? Excuse me? I know what you're saying. And phrasing. Welcome to After Dark. Oh, man. There, Judith, exclaimed Hetty, who saw the accident. I hope now you will own. that praying is useful. The Hurons have broke a paddle, and they never can overtake us. I never denied it, poor Hetty, and sometimes wish in bitterness of spirit that I had prayed more myself, and thought less of my beauty. As you say, we are now safe and need only go a little south and take breath. The danger of being baffled by women. Any any warrior's biggest challenge. Yep, those women. They be baffling. Change the background lighting. Something a little bit more seedy. This was done. The enemy giving by the This was done. The enemy giving up the pursuit as suddenly as a ship that has lost an important spar. The accident occurred. Instead of following Judith's canoe, which was now lightly skimming over the water towards the south, the Hurons turned their bows toward the castle, where they soon arrived and landed. The girls, fearful that some spare paddles might be found in or about the buildings, continued on. Nor did they stop until so distant from their enemies as to give them every chance of escape, should the chase be renewed. It would seem that the enemies meditated no such design, but at the end of an hour their canoe, filled with men, was seen quitting the castle and steering towards the shore. The girls were without food, and they now drew nearer to the buildings of the Ark, having finally made up their minds from its maneuvers that the latter contained friends. Notwithstanding the seeming desertion of the castle, Judith approached it with extreme caution. The Ark was now quite a mile to the north, but sweeping up towards the buildings, and this, too, with a regularity of motion that satisfied Judith a settler was at the oars. When within 100 yards of the building, the girls began to encircle it, in order to make sure that it was empty. No canoe was nigh, and this emboldened them to draw nearer and nearer until they had gone round the piles and reached the platform. "Do you go into the house, Hetty," said Judith, "and see that the enemies are gone. They will not harm you, and if any of them are still here you can give me the alarm. I do not think they will fire on a poor defenseless girl, and I at least may escape, until I shall be ready to go among them of my own accord." Hetty did as desired, Judith retiring a few yards from the platform the instant her sister landed, in readiness for flight. But the last was unnecessary, not a minute elapsing before Hetty returned to communicate that all was safe. "I've been in all the rooms, Judith," said the latter earnestly, "and they are empty, except Father's. He is in his own chamber, sleeping, though not as quietly as we could wish." "Has anything happened to Father?" demanded Judith, as her foot touched the platform, speaking quickly, for her nerves were in a state to be easily alarmed. Hetty seemed concerned, and she looked furtively about her as if unwilling anyone but a child should hear what she had to communicate, and even that she should learn it abruptly. "Do you know how it is with Father sometimes, Judith?" she said. "When overtaken with liquor, he doesn't always know what he says or does, and he seems to be overtaken with liquor now." "Well, that is strange. Would the enemies have drunk with him, and then leave him behind? But 'tis a grievous sight to a child, Hetty, to witness such a failing in a parent, and we will not go near him till he wakes." A groan from the inner room, however, changed this resolution, and the girls ventured near a parent whom it was no unusual thing for them to find in a condition that lowers a man to the level of brutes. He was seated, reclining in a corner of the narrow room with his shoulders supported by the angle, and his head fallen heavily on his chest. Judith moved forward with a sudden impulse, and removed a canvas cap that was forced so low on his head as to conceal his face, and, indeed, all but his shoulders. The instant this obstacle was taken away, the quivering and raw flesh, the bared veins and muscles, and all the other disgusting signs of mortality, as they are revealed by tearing away the skin, showed he had been scalped, though still living. What? Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Okay, that was the end of the chapter. What's happened? What's happened? Okay, a lot and also not a lot for most of the chapter. Okay, so a lot of the chapter was the fighting. So we ended last chapter with an ambush in the castle. And so Floating Tom, Hurry, Chingachgook, and Watawa are in the castle and they were ambushed by the Hurons. The Hurons are there because they know that they have more treasure, and wouldn't it be great if they could get the treasure for themselves? They do not have intention to kill any of them because they do not know that Hurry had recently killed a female of their tribe. If they did, they would have killed him. But a big fight ensues. Hurry is like a rabid animal and just like fights them all off, and they all survive basically. And so then the Hurons are on their canoes and they see Hetty and they see Judith, who have been in this canoe for like overnight, a very long time, and they're finally making it closer and closer to the ark, and they see them and they don't really care about them all that much. Like, they have no designs of like hurting them or kidnapping them or anything like that, but they do like follow them a little bit because they are connected to the rest of the people at the castle. And so they get to the shore. Hetty is praying for both Judith and Hetty, and then they just like sprint once they get onto land. And the scouts that were following them were like, I don't really care about this. We can just let them be. And so they get out scot-free. And so they run and they make it to the castle, and Hetty is sent in. Judith sends her younger sister in to this castle to see if everything is okay, because if there are enemies there, she knows that Hetty is not going to be hurt. That seems very big sister vibes. Like, no, 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 go ahead. You can go in. Go see if it's safe. Go. It'll be fine. I promise you. And so Hetty goes in there and she's like, yeah, everything's empty except for Dad's, chambers. He's sleeping in it, but he's sleeping like he's been drunk. And so Judith is like, oh, that's weird. Okay, so they both go in there and they go into his chamber, and wouldn't you know it, he's been scalped. He has been scalped, but he's still living, which I feel like you're going to lose a lot of blood. I feel like if you're living, you're not going to be living for long after being scalped. It's karma. I know. I know. The guy who wanted to go scalp women and children because their scalps were worth more than male scalps. Mm. Mm. Crazy. That was a mic drop of an end of a chapter. For sure it was. Ooh, that's exciting. Okay. I am really enjoying the storyline of this. I'm liking, the differences in culture that we're getting between the settlers and between the different tribes, as well as pointing out the hypocritical nature that the settlers are having as they are trying to like force their own religion on the indigenous people, and they're like, oh, you're telling us to like love thy neighbor and all of these things, and yet you're being terrible to us. I'm liking the continued reminder that just because one person is terrible doesn't mean that everybody who ascribes to whatever faction this person is from is terrible. And I am enjoying just the plot that we're getting. Do I enjoy the characters? They're fine. They're fine. Um, they're not really getting any sort of growth. Maybe after Papa is scalped, they might get some growth, but they're all pretty much the same. Hetty continues to be called a dummy. Judith is like, I'm so pretty, I'm amazing. Deerslayer is, I mean, he's captured right now, but he hasn't really grown. I guess the only growth that he has was he can no longer claim that he hasn't killed a person because now he has. Hurry and Floating Tom are the worst. Even after they got free from being captured, they still wanted to go scalp people. Mm. Mm. There have been cases of people who have survived scalpings. Really? I just assumed that, like, you would have lost just too much blood because you bleed a lot, like, on your face. There's a lot of little vessels going on your face and, like, your head. Hmm. Now I'm looking it up. Like, what are the odds of surviving? No, not a lightning strike, but I do like that that's how it was auto-populated. Scalping. Let's see. Do do. Ooh, there's a Reddit. Was scalping usually fatal? There's a Reddit, r/ask historians. And postmodern penguin said usually yes, the trauma and blood loss alone would result in the deaths of many victims, and even those who survived initially would face a myriad of complications and would almost certainly die if the scalp remained uncovered. Septicemia, meningitis, and necrosis were all worries when dealing with a scalping victim. Even against these odds, there are at least a couple people who have survived, including Robert McGee, who managed to survive after being scalped as a child. Whoa. Interesting. Huh. Okay, and then somebody else commented more about Robert McGee. He was scalped in 1864 at the age of 13 by Sioux Chief Little Turtle. And then Josiah Wilbarger was another survivor who in 1833 was scalped and left for dead at age 32 when his hunting party was attacked. Interesting. Will Barger was also shot 3 times, and although he miraculously survived the attack, his head wound never fully healed and eventually led to his death a decade later. Whoa. That's wild. Oh, and then William Thompson, a telegraph repairman, was scalped and left for dead in 1867 when his train was attacked by Cheyenne in Nebraska. Interestingly, Thompson's scalp was left behind, and after he retrieved the scalp and healed from his wounds, he took the scalp on a for-profit tour of Europe. It was later put on display in Omaha for 75 years. Ew. Ew. You love the Luffy and Zoro. Thank you. They're my favorites. Ew. Okay, that was a fun little aside. I'm glad that we looked that up. Thank you. Thank you for indulging me. Huh. So yes, I am enjoying it. I am enjoying the storyline. Some of the characters, meh. Some of the writing, meh. I mean, expedient 5 times in one chapter. Come on now. Come on. Come on. And that's going to be where we end today. We will be back. Don't worry. We'll be back tomorrow at 7 p.m. Central, starting with chapter 21. There are 32 chapters in this. We are more than 60% of the way through. We will maybe, I'm going to say this very confidently we're going to finish this book next week. So we have tomorrow and Thursday, and then next week. That's the one that you remember? You saw it on TV? Ew. Ew. So yes, we will be back tomorrow. Thank you all so much for being here. It was a pleasure. As always, whether you lurk, whether you chat, I 1000% appreciate you, and I 1000% appreciate your support. If I do not see you next time, I hope to see you very soon. Bye!